Welcome, everybody, back to the Padernacht Podcast, Brick by Brick. This is episode 4. I am your host, Stephen Padernacht, and this episode we're going to be talking about real business. Real business is important to me to talk about and highlight, especially on this podcast, because I feel like in today's society, there's so many entrepreneurs out there, and with the emergence of social media, everybody wants to start a business. And I feel like everybody doesn't really know what it takes to start a business. So what I wanted to do was I wanted to kind of just run you through my past 20 some odd years of being a business owner, really. And some of the highs, some of the lows, and some lessons that I've learned along the way. And hopefully after listening to this, you'll kind of get an idea as to why I'm so passionate about small businesses and why I actually have an idea that I know what I'm talking about. I think it's important to start at the beginning. And I've talked about this on earlier episodes about how, my dinner table growing up was my father talking to us about business. And I feel like it's important to make sure that I highlight that it was really my upbringing that launched me into business. And the reason I say that is because of the story of how when I graduated from college, my dad gave me two options. And the latter option, which was, work with him for a year, he was going to pay me, and I would never have to depend on another person for a check for the rest of my life. And what that did was it really instilled in me a sense of wanting to dictate my own life, my own income, my own hours, and really determine my future. So I'm going to start really kind of at the beginning of the first business that I started on my own. And I say on my own, but it really wasn't on my own. I was in college and I used to work with a really, really good, let me go backwards. There was a group of us in college and we decided that it was a good idea to throw parties. So what we used to do was we used to rent out a venue. We used to design and print flyers, and then we used to distribute the flyers. We would hire a DJ, and we would basically use the income that came from the door. We would charge anywhere from like $5 to $10 to possibly $20 at the door, and then that money was our income, and then we deducted all the expenses, and that was our profit. So I ran this company with a group of friends, and these are some of the closest friends that I have even to this day. And we really kind of set out to make some money, right? Like that's really what we wanted to do. And it was only because we didn't really want to work a job. We didn't really want to go work at any sort of place where, we were making at that time, whatever it was, $8, $9 an hour, whatever it was. We were like, you know what? It would be a cool idea to start a business where we were running promotions. So we called it Heavy Promotions. Don't ask me where we got the name from, but that's what we did. So when we were in college, we would throw parties. We did this religiously. It was almost like at least like once a month or maybe once every other month. And we had some good nights, but we also had some bad nights. I'll never forget the highlight of the year in college, and I went to LIU Post. The highlight in college was the fashion show, the spring fashion show. And I'll never forget the year that we decided that we were going to throw the after party to the fashion show. Now, this was the biggest event of the year. We didn't ask anybody's permission. We didn't go to the organizers of the fashion show and say, hey, we want to do the official after party. So what happened was, after we announced that we were throwing the after party, there was another group that came in that was more affiliated with the fashion show, and they decided to throw a party too. So immediately we were met with heavy competition, and no pun intended because the name of our company was Heavy Promotions. But at that moment, we learned competition in the marketplace. And we learned that you had to have a superior product. Now, we ended up doing okay that night. We didn't make the money that we thought we were going to make. We ended up breaking even. And we realized that you have to make sure that you're clearing all of your channels when you're in business. And this was a significant lesson for us because we didn't, as I said, we didn't go back to the organizers of the fashion show and say, hey, let's do a collab together. We just pretty much thought we were going to do it ourselves. And that was an important lesson to us. and to me personally, even now to this day, that I make sure that we have everybody on board and make sure that if you're going to do something, you have the okay from everybody that's involved in it. This company was not an official company. It wasn't like we actually had like an official LLC. It wasn't like we had an official company, but we ran it and we thought that we did a pretty good job with it. And there was a lot of lessons that we learned. I mean, think about it. Like you go down the list of things. We had to organize the venue. We had to do the marketing, do the promotion. We had to then worry about profit. We then had to worry about making sure that there was security guards there if the venue didn't have it. So all of these different aspects we kind of learned on the fly. And we didn't know that we were learning these lessons. We just thought that we were trying to put this thing together. So that was one of the first business ventures that I had, and it was extremely important for me moving forward. Now, I want to highlight that after this company, we still wanted to throw parties when we came back here to New York. So what we did was we teamed up with a couple different larger scale bands, and I don't want to kind of go into details about what the bands were and who they were, but we decided that we were going to throw a album release party at the infamous Jimmy's Bronx Cafe. And, you know, we didn't heed the lesson at that time about making sure that we have everybody on board, because we did this and I'm talking about, we were out there putting up posters everywhere, all along, you know, Broadway, St. Nick, all throughout the Heights, all throughout the Bronx. I mean, we had a street team. We were paying people from a street team. And then we didn't have our paperwork in order, and we ended up doing all this for free. We never got paid for this gig. And that was another important lesson for us, that, again, make sure you have everybody on board and make sure that you have somebody who knows what they're doing and has their paperwork and has your paperwork in order, so that way you can make sure that you get paid for your efforts. So that was extremely important as well. Now, after the promotions game, I had a bit of a unique experience when I was 21 years old. My brother, who is in the bar business, he owned a couple bars, and he had bought a bar in the Bronx. Now, you know, as I've said numerous times, I was born and raised in the Bronx. He bought a bar literally down the block from my apartment, from where I grew up. So I knew everybody in the neighborhood, and he thought it would be a good idea to give me the business to run as a quote unquote manager. I was called the manager, but it was really my business. Like, I made all the decisions. I made sure I made the schedule for the bartenders. I made the schedule for the parties. I made the schedule for the porters. I took care of the liquor. I did all this stuff. I did everything that you would do as a bar owner, but I didn't really own the bar per se. Now, what I thought was a really good idea was I was going to do what I knew best. I was going to throw college parties, and there was a couple colleges in the area. And what I did was we promoted the heck out of this party. And I didn't realize how important it was to make sure that you have a valid ID scanner, I guess you could say. Like, we had a bouncer there who checked everybody's IDs, but we got busted by the cops, and then the cops came in and we got hit with, I think it was like, 15, 20 people that were underage. And I was sitting there, and you can only imagine my surprise going back to my brother and having to call him at 2:00 in the morning and tell him to come down to the bar because the cops were there. Lots of important lessons here, right? First lesson is, you got to make sure that you have a real security company there. You got to make sure, it was a friend of mine who was just checking IDs, and I thought that was sufficient enough. I didn't know that I needed to have a real security company that's licensed and insured. So yeah, the important lesson for me was that I learned that you needed to make sure that you had a reputable security company there. I had one of my boys that was there checking IDs at the door, and because he worked security somewhere else, I thought that was sufficient enough. Not enough at all. So another important lesson from this bar was that the bar was always known as an Irish bar. You had a jukebox at this time, and for those of you that might not know what a jukebox is, basically, it was literally just like before the digital jukeboxes. You had to like put the CDs in the jukebox, And those were the songs that you could pick from those CDs. So what was the first thing I did? I went in there and I ripped out all the Irish music. I ripped out all the stuff that I didn't want to listen to, and I replaced it with hip hop, Spanish music, whatever it may be, all the stuff that I thought was cool at the time. And what I did was I alienated the business's base. Okay, the bartenders, all the staff that was there, they all left. And I'll never forget this. One of the customers told me, they said, "You're not going to last long here, young man. You're alienating all of us. You're kicking all of us out." And again, I didn't kick anybody out, but they just felt that I was changing the direction of the bar. So they all left. And lo and behold, 3 months later, when I got busted with all those kids outside, all the underage kids, I ended up getting in trouble and I ended up having to give up the bar. So that was an important lesson for me to learn, that when you're taking over a business, a hostile takeover is never, never the right way to do it. You want to make sure that you have your loyal base involved. Before just alienating people. And honestly, like the flashy sort of throwing big college parties and doing all this stuff, like I thought it was the move, but it really wasn't. Slow and steady would have won the race. And if I would have just kept the bar the way it was and allowed the crowd that was there to integrate with my crowd of people, it probably would have been a lot more successful. But those were valuable lessons that I learned. So that was my beginning into the bar business. Now, when I graduated college, I've told everybody this before, that I got my real estate license. So in the real estate business, the way it works is you get your salesperson's license. Now, when you get your salesperson's license, what happens is you could work for 2 years as a salesperson, and then you can qualify to become a broker. Once you get your broker license, you could then, to become a legitimate broker, what I wanted to do was I wanted to start a company. So I started my first company, and it was, my first legitimate company, I guess you could say, my first LLC, which I still have to this day. And I learned a lot of lessons that first year or two as a new company, right? Like I learned that you needed to have training, you needed to have a system for marketing. You needed to have administrative support. There were so many different things that I learned, over the course of the past 20 some odd years. But those first 2 years were very, very important for me, because I learned what it was to struggle. I learned what it was to, have overhead every single month. I learned what it cost to have office space, telephones, insurance, staff. All of these different things I learned. And then beyond that, I also had to sell real estate, and I also had to actually do the job that I was supposed to be doing. So, one of the things that I talk about now a lot with newer agents is that there's two aspects to your business, right? Number one is the business of real estate, right? And number two is the job of real estate, right? So the business of real estate, and this is what I learned, was that you have to set your plan. You have to make sure that you know what your marketing is going to be. You have to make sure that you know which direction the business is going to go. And then there's also the job of real estate. There's the job of the business. And the job is making the calls. The job is doing the showings. The job is making the appointments. The job is designing flyers. The job is all of these minute, I guess the best way to put it is tasks. And they're very, very different than the business that you're running. So those first couple of years as a business owner were extremely tough, and I learned a ton of lessons there. And I like to say that, now I have the same company here almost 20 years later. So I think that I've done a pretty good job of navigating those waters. And that kind of puts me here to this day and puts me to a point where I'm able to talk about these things. All of these struggles that I went through, all of the hardships that I went through have put me here today to be able to talk about this to you guys. So that way, hopefully you don't go through the same mistakes that I went through. So all the while I'm doing the real estate business, the sales, the retail business, I started doing property management. I'd say I was probably about 30, 31 years old. And I was managing properties for other people. Now this is a much different animal, right? It's a lot easier when you're managing your own properties, because when you're managing your own properties, there's nobody to answer to. And this kind of goes to my point of me not necessarily liking working for anybody else. But one of the things that I learned was that when you're managing properties for other people, you got to make sure that even though they're not your boss, but you're answering to them. You got to make sure you have reports for them. You got to make sure that you have, all of your numbers in line. You got to make sure that you answer to them and you let them know why certain people are paying or not paying and have a plan to move forward. So the property management company started with 3 units, and then it scaled up to 10 units. And then from 10 units, it went up to 20 units. After 20 units, it went up to 50 units. And this is kind of the growth for a lot of property management companies. They start off small and they start scaling themselves up. One of the best ways to scale is by looking for properties all in the same area, because that way you could use some of the same vendors. You could use the same electricians. You could use the same window guys. You could use the same plumbers. So most of the stuff that I was managing was in the Bronx. And then I ended up going out to Connecticut. And in Connecticut, it was a portfolio of probably, what are we going to say? Probably about 100 to 150 units. Now, managing properties in a new state brought a whole new set of struggles, because I was so used to New York City. I was so used to dealing with all of the different agencies and all of the different companies in New York, that now going out to Connecticut was a much bigger challenge. I had to find all new plumbers, all new vendors, and I had to learn the way the building department works. I had to learn how the fire department works. I had to learn how all of these different agencies work together. And it was a struggle. And what I did was I was able to just devote honestly, like almost every day to being out in Connecticut. And it got to the point where I ended up actually just moving out to Connecticut. And I stayed out there 4 or 5 days a week. I lived with my aunt and uncle for a little while, and then I ended up finding my own apartment. And what happened in those years through building that property management company was that I learned a very, 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 very important lesson. And that lesson was that when you're running a business for other people, that you have to treat it like it's your own. And if you don't treat it like it's your own, you're not going to really be successful. You have to really, really make sure that you have the answers to the questions that they ask. And you have to make sure that you're able to set a plan moving forward, right? Like there's nothing like, not knowing what to do when somebody asks you a question when they're paying you, right? So it was extremely important for me to learn these lessons throughout the years with the property management company. Now, another venture that I was involved in was a music company, right? So, I'll never forget, I was talking, actually, let me rephrase. I was talking to a friend of mine that I went to high school with, and, we were talking about some sort of real estate transaction. So he brought down a couple of friends that he knew, and we were just sitting there kicking it, talking or whatever. And we were just talking about different ventures and different things that we wanted to get involved with. And I had mentioned that one of my bucket list sort of items was that I wanted to get a billboard plaque. And, he was like, hey, listen, it's funny you mentioned that, because I'm in the music business and I'm looking for somebody to invest into my company. So what that led to was me buying into a music record label. And that label was not just music based. It was also content creation. It was also a content creation house, or I guess you can call it a townhouse, whatever it may be. So there was a lot of different aspects that I learned there. And I was, rubbing shoulders with some pretty successful people that were in the entertainment business. And, that company worked out really, really well. And I learned a valuable lesson there because I ended up partnering with really good people. And when you partner with good people and people that actually wouldn't snake you over, it changes the game, right? Like I've been involved in certain situations where you're just not dealing with good people. And when you're not dealing with good people, you never really, really buy in 100%. But dealing in the music business and the limited amount of time that I spent there for those couple years really taught me a valuable lesson. And that was just make sure that you partner with good people. If you're not partnering with good people, then you're going to be stuck in a situation where you always have to watch your back, and that's never any fun. So still to this day, I still have a small interest in that same label. And it's worked out really well. The initial money that I invested, I got back. I helped launch in the beginning the company, and my partner, who I'm still very, very close with to this day. He is able to send me yearly reports, monthly reports, whatever it is that I need, and it makes a little bit of money. So that was a successful run at the music business. I didn't actually get my Billboard plaque, but I did get a couple of other plaques that I'll talk about on a future episode. So all of these different business ventures are all kind of going on simultaneous. So I'm trying to run you through a timeline, but somewhere around 2014, I ended up opening up a bar down in Midtown. And that bar I still have to this day. It's called Bar 9. It's a dueling piano bar on 53rd and 9th. And this business has taught me probably the most lessons out of everything. And I could say that very strongly because you're on a daily basis, when you're dealing with a staff of anywhere from 10 to 15 people, right? Like in the real estate company, maybe I had a secretary, maybe I had a couple of salespeople, but this business, you're dealing with 10 to 15 different people. You're meshing their personalities. You're making sure that you have payroll every week. You're coming up with the full marketing schedule. You're coming up with learning how to do internet. At this point in 2014, retargeting ads weren't really a thing. Right? Social media obviously was nowhere near as important as it is today. So, all throughout the time of these past 10 or 11 years, I've learned all of these lessons from, all the various businesses, but Bar 9 specifically has taught me a ton of lessons. And, we just celebrated our 10-year anniversary there, and who knows what the future holds, but I could tell you that making sure that I'm in a position that I can employ anywhere from 10 to 15 different people. And I could, on a nightly basis, provide a platform, a stage for people to come and perform and live their dreams of performing in New York City, or possibly the patron that comes in that wants just a release and to come out and have a good night. Or just to kind of get away from their troubles and come to the bar. Like all of those things I'm able to provide, and it's not easy. It's really not. Like everybody sees the glitz and glamour. Everybody sees the packed house, God willing, packed house. But everybody sees the front end of it. Like they might see the social media or they might walk into the bar, but nobody sees the back end. Nobody sees the countless hours that I'm up in the middle of the night, trying to do the flyers or trying to figure out new marketing ideas or trying to figure out, what direction the business is going to go. Nobody sees the hours of talking with lawyers to discuss any issues that we may have or how to avoid any issues that we may have. Nobody sees the countless applications that you have to fill out for the city of New York and to deal with the local municipalities. Nobody sees the hundreds and hundreds of interviews that you have to make sure that you are facilitating, looking for new staff and looking for new musicians. I mean, I could tell you that I, no joke, have probably interviewed well over 250 people in my life. And at this point, I kind of have it down to a science. But what I've learned along the way is just to go with your gut. It's really the most important thing that you could possibly do, which is just go with your gut. When you're dealing with people and somebody comes in and they have this fancy resume and they have all of these fancy things on their resume, I ask them just straight up questions. And I glance over the resume. I asked them about their experience, but I really asked them about them. And this is something that I learned through dealing with Keller Williams and taking some trainings there, which is you could train somebody on skills. You could train somebody how to do certain things, but you can't train somebody on how to have a good heart. You can't train somebody on how to be ambitious. So what I like to do is that when I'm interviewing people, I like to make sure that I'm talking to them about themselves. And I like to ask them questions like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Where do you see yourself in 10 years? Why is it that you think that you are a good fit for this job? These are all important questions to ask somebody because it'll give you a real sense of who that person is. So Bar 9 has absolutely given me a tremendous amount of lessons. And listen, we've had our struggles. And, here we are in 2025 going into year 11 of being there. And, again, like I said earlier, who knows what the future will hold, but at least I know that I was able to take from this business a lot of life lessons that will propel me forward in the future. So I guess if we wanted to wrap everything up and I wanted to kind of talk about my journey as a business owner, I would say that it's extremely important for you and for everybody, whoever's listening to this, to understand that becoming a business owner is not something that you should take lightly. But I do 1000% advocate for you if you're currently working a 9-to-5 job, if you're currently working a job, but you have dreams and aspirations of becoming an entrepreneur, take the time to learn the industry that you want to get into, but take the time to do something extra. Make sure that you're putting in some extra hours. I mean, a simple time audit, right? If you went through your week and you understood that there's, 24 hours in a day, 7 days a week, that comes out to, and, forgive me, I don't have a calculator in front of me, but I think that's 168 hours per week. If you audited your time and you went through it and you said, okay, I've got 168 hours, 40 of those hours I'm working on my job, my 9-to-5. Another 50 to 60 hours, you got to make sure you're sleeping, right? If you sleep anywhere from 7 to 8 hours a night, that's 56 hours right there. So that's 96 already hours out of your 168 that you can now just earmark or bookmark that for something else. Now that leaves you with approximately 68 hours or so. If you just took an extra hour a night, instead of watching Netflix, instead of, wasting your time scrolling through social media, and you took that time and you put it into a side business, you have no idea where that could lead to. Also, please understand there is a tremendous amount of time that you have to put into anything to master it. And there's a book called Outliers. I believe the author's name is Malcolm Gladwell, and he talks about the 10,000 hour rule. And what he says is that the major principle is that you have to master your craft or put in a minimum of 10,000 hours into any industry or craft before becoming a master. Think about that for a moment. 40 hours in a week, right? 52 weeks a year. What that comes out to be is approximately 2,000 hours a year. Do that for 5 years, now you're a master. So if you only have limited time, it's gonna take a while for you to become a master at it, but you could see some success early and you could figure out a way to make money or to generate some extra side income. And I think it's important for everybody just to understand that your future is in your hands. You control what you can do and where your future is going to go. So if you have the itch, if you have the bug to go out there and start a business, just understand that those opportunities are out there. And this podcast, this platform, what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring business owners on here, entrepreneurs, people who have put in those 10,000 hours and have them give you lessons. So that way we could hopefully try to expedite and speed up the process for you. I can't teach you everything there is to know about business because I'm still a student of business myself and I'm still learning along the way. But what I can do is provide you with people that I know and people that I have experienced and seen firsthand have seen success in their business and allow them to give you different tips and tricks to try to cut the corners a little bit for you and save you some time. So tune in for more episodes. This is episode 4 talking about real business. And as I bring on these business owners, please make sure that you take the time to listen and understand that they have given their blood, sweat, and tears to become successful in their own right. And they're here and I'm here to give you some of these tips and pointers. So thank you very much for tuning in to episode 4, and I'll see you guys next week.